This conference will now be recorded.
So today we will be doing this NICE incontinence and prolapse guideline. This guideline actually it is a recent guideline. Why I decided to do this guideline today, because there are so many changes in 2019 guideline, and then there are so many question books are there where the keys are wrong. Okay, so there is a lot of confusion regarding this, so I thought I should do it. So today we will be discussing in detail regarding this guideline. So basically this guideline, remember, is majorly about notes. No means what not to do. Okay, more than what to do, what not to do is discussed in more detail in this guideline. And there are some details which are not given in the guidelines, like which drugs should be used for urge incontinence or overactive bladder. They have not discussed in detail regarding the drugs. Okay, and some surgeries are not required in detail for you, but you should know the sequence. So first line management is this, second line management is this, and third line management is this. So you should know exactly when to do what. Okay, so we will start without wasting time. We will start discussing it. So first you should know all the definitions of incontinence. So incontinence, you know, it is of three types: stress urinary incontinence, urge incontinence, and mixed incontinence. So stress urinary incontinence is involuntary leakage on effort, like exertion, sneezing, or coughing. Urge incontinence is involuntary leakage which is accompanied or preceded by urgency, that is sudden compelling desire to urinate, and it is difficult to delay. Then mixed urinary incontinence is the combination of both stress plus urge, and then here we have to decide which is the predominant type. Okay, so depending on her history, we have to decide which is the predominant, where is the stress is predominant part or urge is the predominant part. Now overactive bladder is a part of urge incontinence. It is defined as urgency that occurs with or without incontinence. Okay, so and also it is associated with frequency and nocturia. So overactive bladder, there is the symptoms are urgency, frequency, and nocturia, and when it is associated with incontinence or leakage, it is known as overactive bladder weight, and when it is not associated with leakage or incontinence, it is known as OAB dry. Okay, and this overactive bladder is suggestive of urodynamic finding. It is because of detrusor overactivity, but it can be also result of other urethrovesical dysfunction. Okay, so overactive bladder is also again a clinical diagnosis. Then if you want to do a surgical management, you have to prove it by urodynamics. Then regarding definitions of pelvic organ prolapse, so POP is defined as symptomatic descent of one or more of. So compartment wise, you can say either descent of anterior vaginal wall, posterior vaginal wall, or middle compartment, that is at the cervix or uterus, or the apex of vagina in case of hysterectomy. So the symptoms of prolapse include vaginal bulge or sensation of something coming down, urinary, bowel, or sexual symptoms, and pelvic or back pain which is dragging. Okay, and these symptoms, they usually bothersome because they affect women's quality of life. Incidence of prolapse is 8.4. Remember this figure. So prevalence of prolapse in UK, it is known to be 8.4%. And then examination. So the examination prolapse is proven in 50% of these patients. Then 1 in 10 women will require at least one surgical procedure for this prolapse, and the resurgery rate, that is second surgery rate, is as high as 19%. So these are the some of the figures which are the recent figures. Now we will come to the management, diagnosis and management of incontinence. So first we will see the incontinence part, and then we will see the prolapse part. So how you are going to assess the incontinence? So first, whenever you are assessing the incontinence, you have to take the history, and depending upon the woman's symptom, you have to categorize this incontinence either into stress incontinence, urge incontinence, or mixed. And when it is the mixed urinary incontinence, you have to determine which is the predominant symptom, whether it is urge predominant or whether it is a stress predominant. Now, you have to direct the treatment regarding the predominant part. In case of mixed incontinence, you have to start the treatment of the predominant part. Okay, but now the hitch here is when the stress incontinence is diagnosed as predominant. Okay, because for stress incontinence there is no medical management. you have to go for lifestyle modification and then directly for the surgery. So when stress incontinence is diagnosed as predominant symptom, then in mixed incontinence, what you have to do is, first you have to explain her that there is a benefit for non-surgical management and medicines for overactive bladder also. So if the stress incontinence is a predominant symptom in mixed urinary incontinence, you have to start with lifestyle modifications. If patient doesn't improve with lifestyle modification, now you have to give treatment for urge incontinence, and then you should go for the surgical management of stress incontinence. Okay, so it is not that key with lifestyle modifications, if our symptoms doesn't improve, you should not directly go for the surgery, but you have to explain and discuss with the woman regarding the benefit of this medicines for overactive bladder also before going for surgical management. Am I clear for this in case of mixed incontinence? Okay. Now, whenever you are assessing the incontinence in examination and investigation part, these are the three things that you should never forget. One is the pelvic floor assessment, pelvic floor muscle contraction. You have to see that whether this pelvic floor contraction is adequate or not, and for that you have to do the digital examination. Second thing that you have to do is urine dipstick examination for blood, glucose, protein, nitrites, and leukocytes. Okay. And the third thing is bladder diary. Okay. So whenever patient of incontinence comes to you, so whenever in the EMQ, when asked regarding the initial management, these are the three things that you should never forget in your options. So one is the digital assessment for pelvic contractions. Second thing is urine dipstick. And third thing is bladder diary. Okay. So bladder diary it is a 3 days bladder diary that you have to ask patient to fill. So 3 days bladder diaries means volume outflow chart. Volume outflow means what she is drinking, what is her fluid intake, and what is her urine output, the time of urine output, and whether there are any episodes of incontinence or leakage. So you have to fill at least, you have to ask the patient to fill at least 3 days of bladder diary. Okay. Now, in the urine dipsticks, this is the most important chart. You always get some EMQ or this thing on this or SBA on this. So when you do urine dipstick, okay, so there are the 4 possibilities that will be there. So one will be patient will have symptoms of urinary infection, okay, symptoms of urinary infection like burning, urgency. Along with that is Samina, please mute your mic. Dr. Samina, please mute your mic. Okay. So you have whenever you are assessing urine dipstick, you have to see the 2 things: whether the dipstick is positive or negative, and whether the patient has symptoms of this urinary infection or not. Okay. And depending upon that, there will be 4 groups. So in the first group, when the symptoms of UTI, urinary infection, will be there along with dipstick positive, okay, for leukocytes and nitrites. So in that case, what you are going to do, whenever there are any symptoms, you are going to prescribe antibiotics and you have to send the urine for culture, urine midstream for culture. And then if the culture sensitivity shows another result, then you have to change the antibiotic. But at the initial stage, without getting the results of culture, you have to start antibiotics. So when the symptoms are there, you have to prescribe antibiotics plus you have to send the culture. Now patient has symptoms of urinary infection, but dipstick comes negative. In that case, you have to send urine culture. Okay. And if the patient has severe symptom, you have to consider antibiotics also. Okay. So you can give antibiotics. It is not that you have to give, but you can give antibiotics. And if the urine culture report shows anything, then you have to prescribe the antibiotic according to the culture report. Now, third thing will be dipstick will be positive, but there will be no symptoms of UTI. In that case, you should not prescribe antibiotic, but you have to send the urine culture. Okay. And if urine culture is positive only, then you are going to prescribe the antibiotics. Otherwise, not. Now, the last thing will be dipstick negative and there are no symptoms. So in that case, culture is not required, antibiotic also not required. So these are the 4 permutations and combinations when you are doing urine dipstick. Okay. And these are the routinely asked questions. Now, another thing is in the assessment is measurement of post-voidal residue. So post-voidal residue, in which patient you are going to measure? It is not measured in all patients. Remember well, in which patient you are going to measure this post-voidal residue is only in women with symptoms suggestive of voiding dysfunction or recurrent UTI. Okay. And whenever you are going to measure PVR, the first preference is for bladder scan. So PVR you can do it by two methods. Either you can do it in and out catheter or you can do bladder scan. So always a bladder scan is a preferred method than the catheterization because the acceptability is more and adverse incidence will be less. So always bladder scan is a preferred method for post-voidal residual value. Now, in assessment of urinary incontinence, following tests should not be used. Okay. So one is PAT test, Q-tip test, Boney's test, Marshall's test, fluid bridge test, cystoscopy, MRI, CT or X-ray. So other imaging modalities, they should not be used for the urinary incontinence assessment. Also, multi-channel video cystometry, it should not be used for this urinary incontinence measurement. Only urodynamics, simple urodynamics can be used, but there are specific 4 indications that I have already covered in the urodynamics lecture. Okay. Now there are some indications in which thing you have to refer her to the specialist services. So what are these indications? Because it is also comes usually as a SBA. Okay. So persisting bladder or urethral pain, palpable bladder after voiding. Okay. Palpable bladder after voiding, clinically benign pelvic mass, associated fecal incontinence. This is the most commonly asked question. Patient is having fecal incontinence along with prolapse. So here you are not going to offer her prolapse surgery, but you are going to refer her to the specialist services. Suspected neurological diseases, symptoms of voiding difficulty, suspected fistulas, urogenital fistulas, previous continence surgeries, previous pelvic cancer surgeries, previous radiotherapy, and woman with hematuria and recurrent or persistent unexplained UTI. This is also a repeatedly asked question. So in this case, you are going to refer this patient to the specialist services. So basically in this slide, there are the 2 things that they commonly ask is fecal incontinence and hematuria. And third thing is the persistent or recurrent UTI. So in that case, you have to refer her to the specialist services. Now, what is the conservative management? So once you have assessed that this patient is having incontinence, now you have to decide which type of incontinence you have to do this preliminary test, that is bladder diary, then bladder diary, then what you're going to do next is urine dipstick and digital examination. So after these 3 tests, now you're going to start with conservative management, and conservative management starts with lifestyle modification. Now, this lifestyle modification are different for this urge and stress urinary incontinence. So for urge incontinence or overactive bladder, this conservative management is reduce caffeine intake, modify fluid intake, weight reduction if BMI is more than 30, and bladder training for 6 weeks. Okay, so all of this comes as SBA, remember. So first management, conservative management for overactive bladder will be reduce caffeine intake, modify fluid. Now here, remember here smoking is not mentioned in the guideline. Okay, so you will get that SBA, but the smoking is not included. So reduce caffeine intake, modify fluid intake, weight reduction if BMI is more than 30, and bladder training for 6 weeks. Okay, for stress urinary incontinence, modify fluid intake. Remember, well, this is included in the stress urinary. So for both urinary incontinence, NICE has included fluid intake, okay, in the conservative management. Weight reduction if BMI more than 30, and pelvic floor muscle training program, that is PFMT. At least 8 contractions 3 times per day for 3 months. Or for 12 weeks. So this is for stress urinary incontinence, while for prolapse it is for 16 weeks. Remember well, this pelvic floor muscle training program for prolapse is for 16 weeks, while for stress urinary incontinence it is for 12 weeks, and the frequency is 8 contraction 3 times a day for 12 weeks or 3 months. Now, whenever you are offering this pelvic floor muscle stimulation, pelvic floor PFMT, so in that case, electrical stimulation and biofeedback should not be used routinely. Okay, these should not be used routinely, but yes, it can be used where the woman who cannot actively contract pelvic floor muscle. So for those women, to aid the motivation and adherence to the therapy, you can use electrical stimulation or biofeedback, but routinely it should not be used. Okay. And now for urge incontinence, when there is no satisfactory benefit is observed from bladder training. So bladder training you are going to prescribe for 6 weeks, but if there is no benefit from bladder training, now you have to prescribe drugs. But with drugs, this bladder training should be continued. Okay, so this is also again a SBA, remember well. So it is medicine plus bladder training. It is not only drugs, but it is drugs plus bladder training. Now this absorbent products like diapers, urinals, and toileting aids, these are used only in case whenever it is used as a coping strategy pending definitive treatment, as an adjunct to ongoing therapy, and for long-term management of urinary incontinence only after other treatment options have been explored. Okay, so when the patient is not willing for other treatment options, then only it can be used, that is absorbent products. Now the indications for catheter. So catheter, urinary catheter are used for persistent urinary retention which is causing incontinence, symptomatic infections or renal dysfunction. So persistent urinary retention which causes either incontinence, symptomatic infections or renal dysfunction, and it is not otherwise corrected. Okay, and whenever you are using catheters, remember well, first choice is always intermittent catheterization when the patient can do self-catheterize or the carer is present. Okay, so when there is carer is present or the patient can do self-catheterization, intermittent catheter is the first option for this catheter. Okay, after this intermittent, if the intermittent catheterization is not suitable, then you can go for either long-term indwelling urethral catheter or suprapubic catheter. Now, indwelling urethral and suprapubic catheters, there are not hard and fast indications for both of this, but so it is depends on the patient preferences which she wants and other. Okay, so urethral catheters, long-term urethral catheters are used for chronic urinary retention in women who are unable to manage self-catheterization. When there are skin wounds, pressure ulcers or irritations that are contaminated by urine, there is a distress or disruption caused by blade and clothing changes. So that means it is a bedridden patient and where a woman expresses a preference for this form of management. Now, the similar indication exists for suprapubic catheter. Okay. Now, suprapubic and indwelling urethral catheter, the choice will be patients and doctors. There are no hard and fast indications. So it can be considered as an alternative. But here there are some specific things or specific complications. So one thing is there, suprapubic catheter is associated with lower symptomatic urinary infection, but the bypassing will be there, and the bypassing can occur either from urethra or from the suprapubic tract. Also, urethral complications are somewhat more than the indwelling urethral catheters. Okay, so this is more, it is well discussed in the catheter use in gynecology talk. Okay, it is a 2012 talk. It is nicely discussed there. Now, strict no to, as I told you, this guideline is about what you should not do. Okay, so for incontinence, there is no role of intravaginal or intraurethral devices. Okay, for incontinence management, and also there is no use of complementary therapies. Now, what is the treatment of urge incontinence or overactive bladder? So many people have doubt regarding what drugs to be used for this urge incontinence or overactive bladder, because it is not mentioned in the guideline. Even in strategy, it is not given good. Yes, there is a talk, old talk in 2011. It is mentioned regarding this medicine. So now remember well, you have to remember the classes. Okay, so anticholinergic or antimuscarinic drugs, they are oxybutynin, that is either immediate release or extended release, and also transdermal. Okay, So oxybutynin is available in 3 choices, that is immediate release, extended release, and transdermal. Tolterodine, phasotyrosine, solifenacin, tropsium chloride, and darifenacin. So these are the anticholinergic and antimuscarinic. Now you should know which are anticholinergic and which are antimuscarinic. So here remember, darifenacin, phasotyrosine, solifenacin, these all are antimuscarinic, while oxybutynin and tropsium are anticholinergics. Okay. And for nocturia, there are 2 options. One is imipramine and one is desmopressin. Now, imipramine, according to new NICE guideline, imipramine should not be used. So for intractable nocturia, the only option remains is desmopressin. Okay, this is also asked routinely in the SBA. So for intractable nocturia, the option remains is desmopressin. So here they have given this classes. Okay, so here the most commonly asked regarding this darifenacin drug. So darifenacin, it is a M3 muscarinic antagonist. Okay, it is a muscarinic M3 antagonist. It is very commonly asked question. And remember well, it is not recommended for use in women for severe hepatic impairment. So darifenacin should not be used for severe hepatic impairment. Okay. Then tolterodine, it is preferred than oxybutynin in old woman because it has less effect on salivary gland, okay, than oxybutynin. So that's why tolterodine is preferred. Even again, tolterodine is a muscarinic antagonist. Solifenacin, again, it is a M3 muscarinic antagonist. Phasotyrosine, muscarinic antagonist. Okay. And desmopressin, we know it is a vasopressin only, correct? Vasopressin analog. Now, these are the contraindication, adverse effects, and cautions for the use of antimuscarinic drugs. So, contraindications for antimuscarinic is myasthenia gravis, glaucoma, ulcerative colitis, and GI obstruction. So, this is also repeatedly asked in question. So, the patient is having myasthenia gravis and she is having urgent incontinence. Which drug you will prefer? So, now you can't give antimuscarinic, anticholinergic. So, then choice remains mirabegron. Okay. So these are the routinely asked question. Adverse effects. So these are the antimuscarinic adverse effects: dry mouth, constipation, drowsiness, blurred vision, headache, restlessness, nausea, vomiting, palpitations, arrhythmia and tachycardia, dry skin, and hot flushes. Okay. And caution. So it should be used in caution with arrhythmia, coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure, hypothyroidism, gastroesophageal reflux, and renal impairment. So for all these things, basically the caution should be exercised. So always remember, first choice is oxybutynin. Okay, oxybutynin remains first choice. Then for old women, you should not give immediate release oxybutynin. Okay, so frail old woman, you should not use immediate release oxybutynin. So for those patients, darifenacin, tolterodine, tropsium, these will be the better choices. Okay, and then when all 3 drugs are failed, all 3 different acting, the 3 drugs are failed, then you have to go for the surgical management. Okay, so before that you have to go for mirabegron. So whenever you prescribe drug for OAB, first review will be at 4 months. Sorry, you should use at least for 1 minute, whether it is weeks or months.
It is 1 month, no? 1 month, 4 weeks.
4 weeks, na? Yeah. Yes. It is 4 weeks. Okay. So you have to use at least for 4 weeks to see the benefits. Okay. And adverse effects, when you see the adverse effects of this drugs, that means this drug is really working. Okay. So you have to explain the patient that when you get this adverse effect, that means the drugs might be working. Okay. And long-term effects on the cognitive function, these are uncertain. So that you have to tell the patients, because the most of the patients are old age. So just it is 4 weeks. Remember well, it is I think typing mistake. So now, yes, any doubt? Okay. So whenever you are choosing the drug, so first you have to go for the lowest cost drug. So first choice will be lowest cost drug. So it will be oxybutynin. Remember well, first choice will be oxybutynin. When the first choice doesn't work, okay, So first review after 4 weeks. If the patient is having any side effects or there is no improvement in her symptoms, then you are going to prescribe another drug. Okay. If that another drug also, again, you are going to review after 4 weeks. If the second drug is also not working, then you are going to prescribe the third drug. So you have to prescribe at least 3 drugs, different drugs. When there are side effects, when the patient is having improvement of symptoms, but there are side effects, then you can choose transdermal form, okay, than oral form. And for intractable or troublesome nocturia, as I told you, desmopressin can be used, but this desmopressin should be avoided in over 65 years and cardiovascular disease and hypertension. So all these things also with cystic fibrosis. Okay. So this desmopressin should be used in caution with cystic fibrosis and is avoided in over 65 years of age with cardiovascular diseases and hypertension. Now, you should not prescribe flavoxate, profanthrine, and imipramine. So, whenever the nocturia option comes, nocturia question comes, only option remains is desmopressin. Okay. Oxybutynin immediate release should not be used for older women who are at high risk of sudden deterioration in the physical or mental health. Okay. Systemic hormone replacement therapy should not be used for urinary incontinence. Intravaginal estrogen, that is local estrogen therapy, also should not be used to treat overactive bladder symptoms. Okay. So reviewing medicine, first review will be at 4 weeks. So if it is not working or there are adverse effects, you have to change to the another drug. And when one drug is suited for that patient, then you have to do, when the patient is on long-term drug, you have to review every 12 months or every yearly. And when the age is more than 75 years, you have to review every 6 months. Now, if medical management fails, this is the most important slide, remember well. Now, if medical management fails for urge incontinence, now you have to remember this sequence, okay? So, when the medical management for urge incontinence or overactive bladder fail, first thing first you are going to do is urodynamic study to confirm the diagnosis, okay? So, urodynamics, after that MDT review, and after MDT review only you are going to prescribe invasive therapy. Now invasive therapy also comes with this sequence only. So first invasive therapy will be botulinum toxin A 100 units, which is cystoscopic injections. Second choice will be percutaneous sacral nerve stimulation. Third choice will be percutaneous tibial nerve stimulation. Then augmentation cystoplasty, and the last will be urinary divergence. So these are the 5 invasive therapies for overactive bladder or urge incontinence. Now regarding botulinum toxin A, the initial dose is 100 units. It is given cystoscopically. Okay, so you have to do cystoscopy and inject into the bladder wall. Now here the major adverse effect is urinary retention. So patient should be willing to perform clean intermittent catheterization. So self-catheterization patient should be willing to perform, then only you can go for this botulinum toxin. Also, if the patient doesn't want to perform this intermittent catheterization, then she should be willing for indwelling catheter, temporary indwelling catheter during this retention episodes. Also, there are other adverse effects like increased risk of urinary tract infections. And you have to inform the patient that there is no much evidence about how long the injection works, how well they work in long term, and their long term risk. So these things are not known. So you have to tell and inform the patient regarding that. Okay. Now, once you give botulinum toxin 100 units, first review will be at 12 weeks. If there is inadequate symptom relief, then you can increase the dose to 200 units. So you have to again use this 200 units and review after 12 weeks. Okay. If the relief is there, but if the symptom relief lasts for less than 6 months, so you have given 100 units, there is symptom relief, but the relief lasts for less than 6 months, then you can think of increasing the dose to 200 units. If there is no effect with this botulinum toxin A, you have to discuss with the MDT. And the thing you are using is botulinum toxin A. You are not going to use botulinum toxin B. Okay, for overactive bladder, you are not going to use botulinum toxin B. Now, what is this percutaneous sacral nerve stimulation? So this percutaneous sacral nerve stimulation you have to offer to the patient when there is the patient, when the conservative management has been failed, you have been diagnosed as a urge incontinence or overactive bladder, patient is not willing for botulinum toxin or patient is not willing for self-intermittent catheterization. So in that case, you have to offer her percutaneous sacral nerve stimulation. Now remember, well, transcutaneous tibial nerve stimulation, any transcutaneous nerve stimulation is not recommended. Okay, any transcutaneous nerve, whether it is a posterior tibial or sacral nerve, transcutaneous is not recommended, only percutaneous is recommended. So, and the first choice is sacral nerve, percutaneous sacral nerve. So what it is, first there will be a test, a trial will be there where there will be a small implant, it will be there, it is implanted inside the buttock skin, and then there will be small what you can say, it is a regulator, and depending upon that you have to take the patient will take a trial, and if she is found to be having improvement, then that implant will be inserted permanently. Okay, so this is the basic mechanism of this percutaneous sacral nerve stimulation. So it is a just small implant of a small coin, okay, small coin like implant that will be inserted inside the buttock skin, okay, under local anesthesia. So, as I told you, it should be given, it should be used when the patient does not respond to botulinum toxin A, patient doesn't want to get her catheterized intermittently, and here you have to tell the patient regarding the test stimulation, success rate, the risk of failure, the long-term commitment, the need for surgical revision, and the adverse effects. Now, all these things, details, you are not required to know. Remember well, it is not required for you. You should only know which surgery and in which sequence. So if the patient doesn't want botulinum toxin, patient doesn't want percutaneous sacral nerve, then the third option is percutaneous posterior tibial nerve stimulation. So it should be offered after a MDT review. Patient is not responded to non-surgical management, and also the patient doesn't want botulinum toxin A or percutaneous sacral nerve stimulation. So this is the criteria for posterior tibial nerve stimulation. Now they have asked which is the one question, which is the least invasive method. Okay, so least invasive method is this percutaneous posterior tibial nerve stimulation, because it is very easy to insert, because posterior tibial is just that is just above your medial malleolus that they are going to implant. So it is very it is the least invasive process. So this is the answer for that least invasive procedure, because transcutaneous things are not recommended.
Dr. Mridula, so
Yes.
if the question, if we get a question like a patient refuses, or patient is not improved with the botulinum toxin, or she refuses it, what is the next choice? Next choice will be the percutaneous sacral nerve stimulation, right? If they say least,
Yeah.
then percutaneous this posterior tibial nerve.
Tibial nerve. But when they ask, there was one question, no? They asked what is the least invasive method. The patient wants to go for least invasive method. So in that case,
Then
it is a posterior tibial. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ma'am, also I wanted to know this Botox injection is only 100 units once, and then she comes every 12 weeks for review.
First review at 12 weeks. Now the next review, they have not mentioned when it will be. But she may require injections every 6 months. Okay. She may require
Every 6
injections every
months.
6 months also. He may require. We
Yeah,
don't
that
know
is
when she requires. Okay.
okay. So up to 200
Depending
we
on
can
the,
give.
yeah, up to 200 we can give, not more than that at a time. Okay. So previously
Okay,
the
ma'am. Thank
initial
you.
dose was 200. Now they have reduced it to 100. Okay, because they
Yeah.
have found out
Yeah.
that 100 is also working similarly. Okay, so now they have
Okay,
come to
ma'am.
the basic dose is 100. Okay. Now, what is the role of augmentation cystoplasty? So, augmentation cystoplasty should be restricted only for idiopathic diffuser overactivity. Okay, where it has not responded to non-surgical management, patient doesn't want to self-catheterize. Okay, and In that case, you have to explain the woman regarding its side effects, okay? Because in augmentation cystoplasty, what you are going to do, you are going to take a piece of bowel and you are going to attach it to the bladder to increase the bladder capacity. So because of that, that bowel mucus secretion and all these things, there will be bowel disturbances will be there, metabolic acidosis will be there, mucus production and retention in the bladder, UTI and urinary retention. So these are the adverse effects of this augmentation cystoplasty. Also, because of there will be metaplasia and dysplasia can be there because of this bowel loop. This thing, there is also some small risk of malignancy. Okay, and it requires lifelong follow-up for this augmentation cystoplasty. So when the patient is not fit for all other surgical, or patient doesn't want or not responded to all other surgical management, the next management becomes augmentation cystoplasty. And the last thing is urinary diversion. Okay, so urinary diversion, it is considered for a woman with overactive bladder only when non-surgical management has failed and the patient doesn't want botulinum toxin A, percutaneous sacral nerve, augmentation cystoplasty. These are not appropriate or unacceptable to her. And even in case of urinary diversion also, she requires lifelong follow-up because here you are reimplanting the ureters in the bowel loops. So this is regarding urge incontinence. Now we'll come to the stress incontinence. So stress incontinence, as I told you, conservative management is weight reduction, pelvic floor muscle training, and fluid restriction. Okay. So so now if the patient doesn't improve with the non-surgical management, then you have to counsel that patient before surgery regarding benefits and risk of all options, the uncertainties about long-term adverse effects of all the procedures, basically which involve the mesh. Okay, and what is the difference between, so what are the roots of this procedure, what is the anesthesia, what is the stay, what is the outcome, all these things you have to explain to the patient, and social and psychological implications. So what are the surgical options of SUI? So again, this is in the sequence of this only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So first is the colposuspension. First choice for SUI is the colposuspension. This is the totally in contrast with the old guideline. So this is 2019 new guideline. The first choice for SUI is colposuspension because there is a mesh, because of mesh concern. Second choice will be autologous rectal facial slings. Third choice is retropubic midurethral mesh sling. Okay, so mesh becomes third choice. Intramural bulking agent becomes fourth choice. And the last choice is artificial urinary sphincters. Now, the procedure which should not be offered for stress incontinence are anterior colporrhaphy, needle suspension, paravaginal defect repair, porcine sling. Okay, so when you are offering the sling, it is the only rectus facial sling. Okay, autologous rectus facial sling. Other slings are not recommended. Even this Marshall-Marchetti Kranz procedure is also not recommended. So first, as I told you, first option remains the colposuspension. Colposuspension, it can be done by open or laparoscopy route. Always when they ask regarding the open or laparoscopy, laparoscopy is the more preferred route. Okay. Now regarding the intramural bulking agents, you have to remember that these are the permanent injectable materials. Repeat injections may be required. Limited evidence suggests that they are less effective than other surgical options. Okay, so for that you have to give the option of surgical procedure first and then this intramural bulking agents. Okay, also there is limited evidence on long-term effectiveness and adverse effects, and if the intramural bulking agent is used, you have to give the woman written information regarding the bulking agent, its material, trade name, manufacturer, date of injection, and the injecting surgeon name. So all information should be provided to the patient if you are using this intramural bulking agent. Now regarding this mesh surgery for SUI, midurethral sling procedure, midurethral mesh. So you have to tell the patient that it is a permanent implant and complete removal may not be possible. If this mesh is inserted, you have to give the information regarding which mesh, its name, manufacturer, date of insertion, surgeon's name, and all contact details. Now, The type of mesh used is type 1 macroporous polypropylene mesh. Okay. So this is the question which is asked. Remember well. So the mesh used is, it is a macro. Okay. Type 1 macroporous polypropylene mesh. Also, you have to use the color. Okay. The color which has high visibility. Okay. For ease of insertion and revision if there is any erosion. Now, you should not offer this TOT approach. Transobturator mesh should not be used unless there are specific clinical circumstances. Like, if there are previous pelvic surgeries, then you have to go for TOT. Otherwise, always TVT is preferred. Okay, TVT TVT approach is preferred in case of mesh surgery. And when TVT you are using, you should not use top-down approach. Okay, so top-down approach or single incision approach should not be used. So these are the things that you should remember when you are using any mesh surgery. Now, how you're going to follow up after the surgery or any surgery of SUI. So first follow-up will be at 6 months. This is also a question, remember well. So first follow-up after mesh surgery will be within 6 months. Okay. And when you have used a mesh, you have to do a vaginal examination also to rule out any exposure or extrusion. Okay. When the primary surgical procedure, so when there are they want a repeat surgery because the primary surgery for SUI is failed. So in that case, a regional MDT referral should be done. Okay. And also you have to offer the woman advice regarding how to manage this urinary symptoms without surgery if she doesn't want to undergo other surgical procedure. Okay. So basically any failed surgery, you have to take opinion of regional MDT. This you have to remember well. Now regarding medical management of SUI, you should not, the single drug which is used for SUI is a duloxetine. And duloxetine, it is a serotonin noradrenaline reuptake inhibitor. Okay. So this duloxetine you should not use as a first line treatment for SUI. Also, it should not be used as a second line treatment, but it can be used as second line when the patient wants medical treatment and patient is not willing for surgical treatment or patient is not suitable for surgical treatment. Also, you have to tell her the adverse effects which are associated with duloxetine. So this is about the incontinence. Now we'll come to the prolapse. So regarding pelvic organ prolapse, when you want, yes?
When you're doing colpo suspension, your second choice would be the autologous facial sling, and then the injection.
Yes. First choice is colpo suspension.
Okay. And second choice is
1 minute. We will go to that slide. 1 minute. Yes. This is, sorry. First is the colpo suspension. Either it can be open or lap. Okay. Second choice will be autologous rectus facial sling. Third choice will be mesh surgery. Okay. Mesh sling.
So the mesh comes before the injection then?
Yeah, before injections. Yes. Mesh comes before the injections. Okay.
Because they're not doing mesh anymore. So isn't it injection now instead of mesh? Because the mesh is not being used anymore.
See, it's not that key they have stopped using mesh. It is not like that. But when they want to use mesh, you have to take a regional MDT opinion and you have to explain all the pros and cons of mesh surgery. Okay. It is not that it is totally stopped. Okay. That ban has been lifted. Remember well. Okay. The previously what they have told, no. So that ban has been lifted. Now it is not that they are not using, but they are giving all the pros and cons. Regional MDT opinion has to be taken and the national surgery registered, it should be entered, okay, in the national database. So bulking agents are only for those who are not suitable for the surgical management. Okay.
Dr.
Doing colpo suspension, can the second surgery be autologous facial sling if the first one has failed, or we need a MDT for that as well?
Anything, any surgery, primary surgery of SUI is failed, you have to take regional MDT opinion. Okay. Any incontinence surgery, if it is failed, for second option, you have to take regional MDT opinion. Okay, for second surgery.
Okay.
Dr. Mridula, one question here. Like you said, it is open or lap. Which one is
Yeah.
preferred, open or lap? Because I think it is open which is preferred. I think something like that.
Yes, many places they've said open in many
Yeah, many books say open.
not
No,
lab.
why open is preferred? It is never, nowhere it is written that open is preferred. Yes, in previous guideline, they have clearly mentioned it was open colpo suspension. Okay, in previous guideline. But now in
Okay.
this guideline, they have written that it can be either open or lap. In previous guideline, they have given that open colpo suspension is the choice. Okay, so first
But
choice in the
which one we
previous
should
guideline.
now,
Yeah,
because
so,
there is a question on this also, no? Suppose
yeah,
it comes, which one is preferred, open or lap? So which one we should choose? Lap?
yeah.
We should go for lap.
Actually,
We should go for lap.
the success with open is more than lap, ma'am. I've read that. That's why many books are saying open, actually.
Actually, the success rate, it is almost, in both cases, it is 70% only. I don't think it is more than that. The success rate is around 70% for
Isn't
SUI, any
lab depending
colpo
on
suspension.
expertise or something? If your lab, if you
Yeah,
have the
it
expertise,
depends upon the expertise. Yeah, but if you get the choice, it is the lap is preferred. Okay, if you get the choice, the lap will be preferred, because now the guideline clearly says it can be open or lap. Previous guideline was clearly mentioned. In previous guideline, they have clearly mentioned it was open colpo suspension. Okay. In previous guideline, in the TOG also, they have mentioned open colpo suspension in 2016 TOG also. Okay. But now in 2019 guideline, they have clearly mentioned either it is open or lap. Okay. If it has been like that, in lap, the success rate is less, which they would have clearly mentioned, no? That open has more success rate. Correct? I think for both
Okay, ma'am.
success rate is around 70%, but yes, I will still confirm and I will tell you. But for both, according to me, success rate is around 70% for both colpo suspension.
Okay.
Okay, either it is open
Yeah.
or lap.
Yeah, one more thing I want to ask, like for stress urinary incontinence, the first line will be lifestyle, that is fluid restriction and pelvic floor muscle training.
Yes.
And second line will be any of these surgeries. I mean, of course,
Yes.
in the order colposuspension
Yes.
or anything. And
Yes.
then third line will be
Will be duloxetine.
duloxetine.
Yes.
Okay, but if she refuses a surgery, then duloxetine comes in the second itself.
Second line. Yeah. If the patient doesn't
Okay.
want a surgical management or patient is not fit for surgery, then see, if the patient is not fit for surgery, then the second option comes is intramural bulking agents. Okay. If the patient doesn't want
Okay.
that also, then comes duloxetine. Okay. If you want in the
Okay.
order, it will be intramural bulking agents, and the last thing will be duloxetine. Okay. And the last of the last
Okay.
will be artificial urinary sphincters. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So now we will go to the prolapse. So while assessing prolapse, definitely you will first take history regarding the symptoms of prolapse. What are her urinary complaints, bowel complaints, or sexual function? Okay. Now you have to examine her to rule out any pelvic mass. Okay, and any other pathology. Now, if the patient is referred for secondary care, gynecologic care for other symptoms, okay, and then you have find out while examination, you have found out that it is a prolapse, then you have to refer her to the specialist services where their expertise in prolapse is there. Okay. Also, whenever you are going to examine the prolapse, you have to quantify this prolapse according to the POPQ classification. Along with that, you have to assess the activity of pelvic floor muscle. You have to assess for vaginal atrophy, and you have to rule out any pelvic mass. Okay. So these are the important things whenever you are going to examine any prolapse. Also, you have to use a validated questionnaire. Okay. Validated pelvic floor symptom questionnaire to see the quality of life impact. Okay. Also, you should not do ultrasound or any other imaging if the vaginal prolapse is evident on the examination. If it is clinically evident, no need of imaging or just for prolapse. But if you are suspecting any other pelvic pathology, you should go for imaging. Now, if the patient is complaining of prolapse symptoms, but the prolapse is not demonstrated on routine examination, then you have to consider repeating the examination with the woman either standing or squatting. Okay. And or at different time. Now, the symptoms which need special investigations. So when if the patient is having symptoms of prolapse or the pelvic prolapse is there, but along with that urinary symptoms are there, then you have to investigate, like you have to do urodynamics, you have to do scan for post-vital residue. Okay. Also, there are obstructed defecation or fecal incontinence is there. In that case, you will be referring her to the specialist services. If there is any pain associated with prolapse, you are going to investigate her, and the symptoms which are not explained by the routine examination findings. So all these case you are going to do extra investigations other than the this only prolapse examination. Now, what is the non-surgical management of this prolapse? So, losing weight. Whenever, now remember well, when the BMI is less than 30, you should not go for this lifestyle modification of weight reduction. Always remember that if the patient's BMI has been given, if it is less than 30, your lifestyle modification will not come reduction in weight. Okay. Also, minimize heavy weight lifting, preventing or treating constipation. If there is vaginal atrophy, then you have to give vaginal estrogen. Also, if the patient is having some physical or mental impairment, that is cognitive impairment, instead of pessaries, you can also use this estrogen releasing ring, okay, which can act as pessary plus it will also treat vaginal atrophy. Now, pelvic floor muscle training for prolapse, as I told you, it is for at least 16 weeks. Okay. So first option for pelvic for prolapse is the first treatment is pelvic floor muscle training, and it is for at least 16 weeks. And this pelvic floor muscle training should be offered for stage 1 and stage 2 prolapse. Okay. It is the stage 1 and stage 2, and it is minimum for 16 weeks. Now the pessaries. So pessaries, you have to consider pessaries for all cases of prolapse. Okay. So according to the GTG, World Prolapse GTG, what they have told is from stage 2 to stage 4, pessaries are recommended. Even for stage 4 also, pessaries are recommended. So consider a vaginal pessary for women with symptomatic pelvic organ prolapse alone or in conjunction with PFMT. Okay. Now, before starting pessary treatment, you have to treat the vaginal atrophy with estrogen. You have to explain to the patient that it is a trial and error basis. Actually, the pessary fitting is a trial and error basis. So you may require more than one appointment, okay, to find out suitable pessary. Also, you have to tell which pessaries are suitable for sexual intercourse and which pessaries are not. So ring pessaries are suitable, but shelf pessaries are not suitable for sexual intercourse. Also, you have to explain the complications like vaginal discharge, bleeding, difficulty in removing pessary, or sometimes expulsion. And the care of pessary involves it should be removed at least once every 6 months. Okay, so for that she has to attend the OPD, or once she can do it on her own, she has to do it on her own every 6 months. But first appointment should be at 6 months. Actually, first appointment after pessary should be at 1 month. Okay, to see whether this pessary is well fitted or not, whether there is no any erosion. Okay, and after that 6 months should be appointment for the removal of the pessary and fitting another one. And what are the surgical management for this prolapse? So surgical management is offered to those who have not improved with the non-surgical management, or the patient who doesn't want non-surgical management. Okay. Now, whenever you are offering surgery to prolapse, you should not offer a concomitant incontinence surgery. If the patient doesn't have symptoms of incontinence, you should not offer the incontinence surgery. Also, you have to tell her that if the patient is having anterior prolapse, anterior or apical prolapse, after the prolapse surgery, she may develop incontinence. Okay, so there might be some occult incontinence which can manifest after the surgery. If the mesh is used for prolapse surgery, you have to explain to the woman regarding the type of mesh, it is permanent or not. Also, what are the complications, short or long-term complications and its outcomes also. Okay, and the all details regarding that mesh. Now, this is important. So, what are the surgeries which are offered for uterine prolapse? So, when the patient doesn't want, or patient have no choices whether she wants to preserve the uterus or not. So here, what are the options? One is you can do hysterectomy, vaginal hysterectomy along with SSF, that is sacrospinous fixation. Okay, or you can do without removing the uterus, you can do vaginal sacrospinous hysteropexy, or you can go for Manchester repair, or you can go for mesh, that is sacrohysteropexy with mesh. You can do either go for laparoscopic or abdominal, okay, mesh surgery for this prolapse. The patients who wants to preserve the uterus, only the option which is gone here is vaginal hysterectomy. All other three options are similar. So she can either go for vaginal sacrospinous hysteropexy, either she can go for Manchester repair. But see, the Manchester repair is not an option if the patient wants further fertility. Okay, because here you are cutting the cervix. Okay, so that cervical mucus effect will be lost, and for that Manchester repair is not a good option when the patient wants fertility. Also, you have to give the option of mesh surgery, that is sacrohysteropexy, when the patient wants to preserve the uterus. So these are the three options when they want to preserve the uterus, and the vaginal hysterectomy is added to this option when the patient has no preference for the uterus preservation. Now, surgery for anterior and posterior prolapse. Remember well, there are, for any anterior compartment or posterior compartment, the only option available is either anterior repair or posterior repair without mesh. Okay, so the option available according to this recent guideline is only repair without mesh. Okay, either for anterior or posterior wall prolapse. Now, if the patient is having SUI, stress urinary incontinence along with prolapse, you can consider concurrent surgery for SUI plus prolapse. So here the option will be, so previously the option was vaginal hysterectomy along with this PVT. Okay, that is retropubic mesh sling according to past guideline. But according to 2019 guideline, when the patient is having stress urinary incontinence along with prolapse, the option remains is colposuspension. Okay. So, along with hysterectomy, she will go for colposuspension. Now, these are the clinical governance issues, or these are the most important part of this thing is, so patient should be consulted to MDT before she has to undergo any surgical, okay, any invasive treatment. Patient should be referred to the local MDT. Okay, so when the patient wants to undergo surgical treatment for primary stress urinary incontinence, overactive bladder, or primary prolapse. So it is not for repeat surgery. For all primary surgeries, the patient should be referred for local MDT. And now what this local MDT is? It is two consultants which are expertise in managing incontinence or prolapse, urogynecology or continence nurse, pelvic floor specialist or physiotherapist, and they can also include colorectal surgeon, occupational therapist, and a member of the care of elderly team. Okay, so all primary surgeries should be referred to local MDTs. And now regional MDT. So this is asked as a question. So regional MDT, where the referral is required. So when the patient is having repeat continence surgery, any repeat surgery for incontinence, either it is a stress or urge, it should go to the regional MDT. Also, when they are having repeat same site prolapse surgery. Now, what do you mean by this? So, if the patient is having already vaginal hysterectomy for prolapse, okay, and now patient is again having ward prolapse, okay, that is the same site prolapse, that is apical compartment prolapse, then she should go for regional MDT. Also, if she is having anterior wall prolapse and you have done anterior colporrhaphy or anterior repair, and now patient is again coming with anterior prolapse only, then you are going to refer her to the regional MDT. But you have done anterior colporrhaphy and now patient presented with posterior wall prolapse, there is no need to go for regional MDT, but local MDT is okay. Now, if the preferred treatment option is not available in the referring hospital, then they should be referred to regional MDT. Also, there are coexisting bowel problems which may need colorectal intervention. Vaginal mesh. So, for any mesh surgery, she should be referred for regional MDT. Any mesh complications, okay? Any mesh complications or any unexplained symptoms after mesh surgery. And when the patient wants surgery and patient also wants fertility preservation. So any fertility preserving surgery for incontinence or prolapse, she should be referred to the regional MDT. Okay. Now regional MDT, what does they include? So it is a subspecialist in urogynecology, a urologist, continence nurse, pelvic floor physiotherapist, radiologist, colorectal surgeon, and pain specialist. And the optional are the health care professional, which is trained in bowel feedback, also clinical psychologist, member of care of elderly team, occupational therapist, surgeon skilled at operating in the obturator region, and plastic surgeon. And as I told you, all surgeries which are done for urinary incontinence and prolapse, they should be noted in the national database. Okay, national database, they should be included. All surgeries should be entered in the national database of surgery, and they are followed up. Okay, all their follow-up details should be also included. So the patient names, patient details, contact numbers, hospital numbers, surgeon name, and what are the material which is used, what is the suture material, what is the mesh, what is the bulking agent. So all these things, it should be entered in the national database registry. Okay, now this is the thing they are asking commonly now. So what are the complications which are associated with mesh surgery? Patient has previously undergone mesh surgery and now patient comes with complications. So what can be the complication? So either it can be pain, okay, so pain or sensory changes. It can be in the back, abdomen, vagina, pelvis, leg, groin, or perineum. It can be either provoked or unprovoked, or it can be provoked by either movement or sexual activity. Either it can be generalized or localized in the distribution of specific nerve. Vaginal problems like discharge, bleeding, protrusion of mesh, painful intercourse, okay, or penile trauma. Urinary problems like recurrent infection, incontinence, retention, pain during voiding. Bowel symptoms like difficulty in defecation, incontinence, rectal bleeding, or passage of mucus, and any symptoms of infection along with other combination of symptoms. So when you are suspecting any mesh related complication, you are going to take a detailed history. So which mesh was used, what the procedure was done, okay. Then what is the relationship of symptoms to that mesh? You have to do a vaginal examination. You have to see if there is any mesh palpable, extruded, or exposed. You have to localize the pain, do a rectal examination if it is required. Also consider performing neurological assessment, okay, if there is any sensory disturbances there. Investigation for mesh complications. So it is depend upon the location. Now these investigations are depend upon the location. So if there is mesh for anterior prolapse is done and patient is having bladder complaint, she should go for cystoscopy. Same if it is posterior mesh and the patient is having bowel complaint, she should go for sigmoidoscopy. If the patient is having intra-abdominal, okay, intra-abdominal mesh, and she is having problem, she should go for laparoscopy or MRI. Okay, so it depends upon the symptoms and the site of the mesh. And now how you can manage the complications with this mesh surgery. So you have to tell the patient that there is limited evidence on the benefits of partial or complete removal, okay, compared with no removal. Also, the surgery to remove the mesh, it is associated with significant complications like organ injury, that is bowel injury, bladder injury, worsening of pain, or sexual dysfunction. It is not possible. Sometimes it is not possible to remove the mesh completely. And it is not certain also if the removal of mesh will relieve the symptoms of or not. Sometimes removal of only part of the mesh also helps in relieving the symptoms. Okay. And if the mesh is removed, the symptoms may recur. So all these things you have to tell when you are managing any mesh complications. Now, if there is vaginal extrusion of the mesh, okay, if there is vaginal exposure or vaginal extrusion of the mesh, if the mesh area or exposed area is less than 1 centimeter, you can use topical estrogen. Okay, topical estrogen creams you can give and you can follow up after 3 months, and you have to see whether there is still that exposed part is there. Okay, and if that exposed part is still there, then you can go for either partial or complete removal of the mesh. Even if the area is more than 1 centimeter, Or if the patient doesn't wants to go for this topical estrogen, that time also you have to offer her surgery. But as I told you, you have to tell all the risk involved with the mesh, whatever I told previously. That is, it might not be possible to completely remove. There are incidents of organ injury. Also, the symptoms may recur. Also, when the patient is complaining of dyspareunia while mesh, okay, after the mesh surgery, then you have to see whether it is a really a mesh related problem or other problem. So if there is not a mesh abnormality, then you have to consider non-surgical management like pain management, vaginal estrogen, dilators, counseling, physiotherapy. Okay, and if the pain doesn't respond to this initial management, then you have to refer her to the regional MDT. So this is regarding the prolapse and mesh complications. So this completes your the nice guideline of prolapse and incontinence. Now we'll discuss some questions and answers. So this is the EMQ. Yes, yeah.
Ma'am, what is the normal post-void residual urine that is clinically insignificant, ma'am?
It is according to talk. Actually, it is 100, 150, and 50. All guidelines and talks give different answer. Okay, but go with the talk. I think it is 100. Recent talk of urodynamics.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah. So coming to the questions and answers, this is the EMQ. These are the questions and these are the answers. Okay. So these are the options. So I will read the first question. You just type the answers in the chat box. Okay. So 40 years old multiparous woman who was referred to her GP due to prolapse and mixed urinary incontinence. On examination, she has grade 1 cystocele and rectocele. Okay. No stress incontinence is demonstrable. Her bladder diary is suggestive of frequency and urgency. What is the most appropriate initial management option? These are the options.
Ma'am, question page, please.
Yes. 1 minute. See, 40 years multiparous who is having grade 1 cystocele and rectocele. Patient is having prolapse and mixed incontinence. No stress incontinence. Bladder diary is suggestive of frequency and urgency. What is the most appropriate initial management plan? Yes, very good. It is a physiotherapy and bladder training. Yes, it is physiotherapy and bladder training because she is complaining of mixed incontinence. Okay, so answer is M. Second question, 55-year-old woman who has been diagnosed with interstitial cystitis, oral therapy has been unhelpful. What is the next available management option? This is not from this guideline. This is from the BPS guideline, but still. Yeah. As oral therapy is not useful, she will now for intravesical hyaluronic acid injection. Okay. So answer is I. Third question, 60-year-old woman who underwent TVT, who 2 years ago, she has attended for follow-up with recurrent stress incontinence. Conservative management has failed and clinically stress incontinence is demonstrable. She is now requesting further surgical treatment. What is the next line of management? Now remember well, this is a failed surgery. Okay, this is a failed primary surgery. So failed primary surgery is an indication for urodynamic. Okay, so there are only 4 indications for urodynamic study before invasive. So one is any urge incontinence. Before surgical management of urge incontinence, she requires urodynamics. Any voiding dysfunction, she will go for urodynamics. Any failed stress urinary incontinence surgery, she will go for. Primary stress urinary incontinence, there is no need for urodynamics, but any previous failed surgery of stress incontinence, she requires urodynamic. Okay, so answer here is P. Next,
Ma'am, can you repeat the indications? Urodynamic studies.
yes. So one thing is any surgical management of urge incontinence. Okay. Second thing is patient is having voiding dysfunction. Okay. Then third thing is mixed incontinence where predominant type cannot be determined. Mixed incontinence where predominant type is not determined. Fourth thing is repeated surgery, that is previous failed surgery for stress urinary incontinence, and patient is having anterior wall prolapse along with stress urinary incontinence. Okay, so these are the indications for urodynamics.
So
Next
before
question,
doing
40.
surgery for urge incontinence,
Urge incontinence for any
before
surgical
surgery,
management. For urge you have to
yeah,
do. For stress you should
yeah,
not do. Urge you
for
have to
failed
do.
we do for stress.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. For primary, for stress not required.
Dr. Mridula, that previous question, please. The first question we said it is the previous question, no? Previous slide.
This is the only slide.
Okay, okay. Here we said about this is prolapse with anterior this cystocele and cystocele and
Rectocele.
yeah, rectocele. If there is cystocele, that means this is an anterior prolapse also, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So does it need this urodynamic study also?
Yeah. Now urodynamics is required for surgical management. Urodynamics is not required for conservative management. Okay, when it is a very clear thing. Okay, got it?
No, what I'm telling is that we have to say what is the most appropriate initial management. So,
Yeah. So initial
won't we go
management.
for urodynamics here?
No. When in case of mixed incontinence, when the predominant type is not determined, and whenever you want to go see urodynamics, you have to do only before surgical management, not before medical or conservative management. Urodynamics is not required when the diagnosis is there. Okay, not required. For any conservative management, it is not required. Urodynamics is not required. Whenever you want to go for surgical management, urodynamics you should go. Okay.
Okay.
So next question, 49-year-old woman with 3 children born by vaginal delivery presents with leaking on exercise, coughing and sneezing with occasional urgency. She has tried pelvic floor exercise with little improvement and she seeks definitive treatment. On examination, there is minimal prolapse and urine analysis is clear. Yes. Yeah. Now it is colposuspension, correct? Because it is a stress urinary incontinence, patient wants surgical management. So answer is E. Very good. Now next thing, because she wants definitive management here, she is not fit for this thing, pessary, okay? As she seeks definitive treatment. Now the last question, 7. What is the D option? Bulking. Why bulking agents? Bulking agents is not at all an option for stress urinary incontinence when the patient is fit for surgical management. Okay, surgical management is the first option before bulking agents. A 73-year-old woman presents with symptoms of urgency and urge incontinence. She states her abdomen feels more bloated and she cannot do the top button of her trousers up anymore. Urine analysis is clear.
A.
Yes. Yeah. No, it is actually it is a pelvic scan. First, she will go for pelvic and abdominal scan. So basically, we will rule out any post-vital residue. And second thing, also because she is bloated, we have to see any pelvic masses. So it is a pelvic plus abdominal ultrasound, not only abdominal. Okay. So answer is J. Next, 80-year-old hypertensive lady who has overactive bladder symptoms. The single best option for drug therapy. 80 years old. Yeah, very good. Because oxybutynin immediate release, you cannot, you should not prescribe to the old woman. So option is darifenacin. Option is D.
Dr. Mridula, can you put just previous slide with the answers, please?
1 minute.
What was the side effect of darifenacin? Was it hepatic? Hepatotoxicity?
Contraindicated in severe hepatic insufficiency. Okay, severe hepatic damage.
And
It's
desmopressin
contraindicated.
was cardiac hypertension, right?
Cardiac, cystic fibrosis, and hypertension. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, previous slide, 1 second, please. Previous questions, EMQs.
Okay.
Ma'am, suppose in the fourth question, she was a youngster and she is desiring of pregnancies, then first we will go for bulking agents.
First, we'll go for pessary in that case. Okay. First, we'll go for pessary and then bulking agents. Yes. Okay. And for that patient, she will go for regional MDT first. Okay. If she wants a further pregnancy, she will go to the regional MDT if she wants any definitive treatment.
Okay.
Next one, 84-year-old patient. She presents with symptoms of urgency, urge incontinence, and nocturia. The patient is taking several different medications for her other medical conditions. A diagnosis of overactive bladder is made. The general practitioner has already tried oxybutynin, but the patient had side effects, and this was stopped. Which anticholinergic medication now would you consider? Anticholinergic, not antimuscarinic. Okay. So the answer is E. It is tropsium, it is anticholinergic, all other are antimuscarinic. These are almost M3 receptor antagonist, all others are. So the answer is E. A woman is seen on the post-operative ward round following the insertion of transobturated tape for treatment of SUI. Within what time frame should she offer follow-up appointment with a vaginal examination to exclude erosion? Yes. Answer is D, within 6 months. What is the mode of action of darifenacin?
A.
Yes, it is M3, muscarinic receptor antagonist. Answer is A. Which invasive treatment for an overactive bladder is suitable for women who are unable to perform clean intermittent catheterization? Yes, it is D. Okay, it is percutaneous sacral now. So this is ends our question. So yes, we are conducting crash course for this January candidates from October to December. Okay, there will be total 21 sessions and we will give you all PPTs and module wise test will be there and 3 free mock exams will be there. So if anyone is interested, please contact us. And bye. Now who are going for tomorrow's this September examination? Now please don't try to read anything. Travel safely. Take some emergency medicines with you like paracetamol, and if anything you are taking, antacids basically. And the next thing is keep some food and chocolate with you. Avoid taking outside food. Okay. And best of luck who are going for September examination. And for January ones, please start preparing hard. Now very less time is remaining. Bye. Bye, friends.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
ma'am.
evening.
Bye, ma'am. Good
Thank
night.
you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.